8 months she counted 12 steps from his desk to the elevator, not to measure the distance, but to stop herself from falling apart, because Park Juno treated her like furniture, like background noise, like a function that appeared each morning and disappeared. And she had almost quit on Wednesday night, letter half-typed, cursor blinking, before she closed the laptop and set her alarm and chose one more day. She never made it to his office Thursday morning. And the thing nobody in that building, not his secretary, not his board, not his furious mother would understand, is that the accident that put her in that hospital bed didn't just
I'm so
change
sorry
her
I
life.
never saw you, but now
It detonated his.
I see you. I care.
And he still doesn't fully know it yet. Bell subscribe right now and ring the bell. Stories like this one drop every week, and you do not want to miss a single one. She slammed the coffee down. Not hard enough to spill it. Just hard enough to make a sound. Just hard enough to say something she was never permitted to say out loud. Amara Osei did not look up. She kept her eyes on her hands. On the rim of the cup. On anything except the man sitting behind that enormous mahogany desk who had just said to his secretary, loudly enough that 3 people in the outer office turned their heads, "Why does she always take so long? Is this really the best we could find?" She turned and walked away. 12 steps to the elevator. She counted every one. She always counted. It kept her breathing even. It kept the pressure behind her eyes from becoming something more embarrassing in front of people who were already looking for reasons to dismiss her. 12 steps. Elevator button. Doors closed. She exhaled. Amara had been in Seoul for 8 months. 8 months of rising before the sun turned the Han River from black to gray, of taking 2 buses and 1 subway just to arrive early enough to not be noticed arriving. 8 months of ironing her blouses the night before so they would have no wrinkles. 8 months of learning that in a building of 500 people, where she was the only African woman on any floor, invisibility was a thing you could work toward but never quite reach. They always saw her. They just chose to see only what confirmed what they had already decided. She had heard them from her first week. Some of them weren't even subtle. Why did they hire her? Choi from the financial division had said it to his desk neighbor while Amara was refilling the printer 6 feet away, as if she were office furniture incapable of processing language. She doesn't even belong here. I heard they needed to fill some kind of diversity quota, the other man murmured back. What diversity? She's a secretary. Amara had picked up the paper tray. She had walked back to her desk. She had sat down and opened a spreadsheet and done her work. What else was there? She was 29 years old, 6,000 kilometers from home, with a mother who called every Sunday to say she was proud and a bank account that needed this job to survive another month in one of the most expensive cities in the world. She had left Accra with 2 suitcases and a visa and a dream she'd been too superstitious to name too specifically. She had a degree in business management from the University of Ghana. She had 3 years of administrative experience. She had stayed up reading about Korean corporate culture, had taken online language classes for 6 months before her departure, had memorized protocols and hierarchies, and the 17 different ways to bow depending on seniority. Seoul had absorbed all of that preparation and looked straight through her anyway. The only position Juno Group had offered was office assistant, level 1, the lowest rung on the ladder. Her responsibilities were clear and deliberately small: morning mail, supply ordering, coffee delivery to the 42nd floor executive suite. Coffee to Park Juno. Every morning. 7 a.m. sharp. Black. No sugar. 1 cup. Set it down. Leave. Do not speak unless spoken to. He had never spoken to her. Not once. Not a single word in 8 months. She had come to think of him less as a person and more as a ritual. A closed door. A desk behind which sat the most powerful man in the building, too important to register her existence. She brought the coffee. She left. She did not exist in his world, and she had trained herself, with great discipline, not to let his world get inside of hers. Monday, she brought the coffee. He was reviewing documents, didn't look up. Tuesday, she brought the coffee. He was on a call. He waved his hand at her like she was smoke to be dispersed. Wednesday, she brought the coffee and heard Choi laughing from across the room and caught the word foreigner, used not as a descriptor but as a punchline. She set the cup down with that controlled, deliberate pressure, not hard enough to spill, just hard enough to feel real, and she walked her 12 steps to the elevator. Wednesday night, in her small apartment in Mapogu with its view of a parking garage and a convenience store, she opened her laptop. She opened a blank document. She typed, "Dear Mr. Park and the HR department, I am writing to formally resign from my position as office assistant, effective." She stopped. She sat for a long time looking at those words. She thought about the airport. Her mother at the departure gate, gripping both her hands, saying, "You are going to become everything you already are." She thought about her brother Daniel, 17 years old, who had told every person in their neighborhood that his sister was going to work in Korea and had said it with the specific, fierce pride of someone who believes completely and without evidence. She thought about the loan, the plan, the version of herself she had promised to build. She highlighted the sentence. She stared at it. She closed the laptop without deleting it. She set her alarm for 5:30 a.m., the same as always. She never heard it go off. The call came at 11:07 p.m. A motorcycle running a red light on Tehran Aro, Amara's taxi crossing the intersection. The taxi driver unhurt. Amara with 2 fractured ribs and a concussion severe enough to keep her unconscious for several hours and a wrist so badly sprained the emergency room nurse had looked at it and said something in rapid Korean that another nurse had translated, gently, as, "This needs time." She had been registered at Seoul General at midnight. She had listed no emergency contact in Korea. The name on the international line, Mrs. Abina Ose, Accra, Ghana, had gone to voicemail 3 times. The hospital had done what hospitals do. They noted it, monitored her, and let her sleep. By 7 a.m. Thursday, Park Juno was seated behind his desk in a freshly pressed suit staring at a corner of his desk where something was missing. He checked his watch. 7:12 a.m. He pressed the intercom. "Where is my coffee?" His secretary's voice came back with a quality he couldn't quite identify. Careful. Like someone choosing each word individually. "Sir, Miss Amara was involved in a traffic accident last night. She is currently admitted to Seoul General Hospital." The intercom lines stayed open. Juno said nothing. The pen he had been holding was on the floor. He didn't remember his hand opening. "Sir? Should I arrange for a temporary replacement for the..." "Which hospital?" A pause. "Seoul General, sir. But you have the Samsung partnership meeting at 8 and they..." "Reschedule it." "Sir, reschedule all of it." He was already standing. "Everything." He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair. He walked out past his secretary's desk, past the open plan area where a dozen employees immediately found urgent reasons to look at their screens, and he got into the elevator. Backhand index pointing down. You're at the moment everything changes. Make sure you're subscribed so part 2 lands straight in your feed. Hit that button now. In the car, he told himself things. She was an employee. He had a legal duty of care. This was a management responsibility, nothing more. He would go, confirm she had appropriate support, arrange whatever was needed through the correct HR channels, and leave. This was professional. This was sensible. This was nothing. He told himself all of this for the entire 20-minute drive. He stopped telling himself anything the moment he walked into room 412. He had not thought about what she would actually look like. He realized now that he had never actually looked at her. He had seen her the way you see a doorknob or a light switch, as a function, a piece of daily routine so integrated it had become invisible. She had been a cup of coffee that appeared each morning with mechanical reliability. That was all he had allowed her to be. The person lying in the hospital bed was not a function. She was small in a way he hadn't expected. Her braids had come loose and spread across the pillow. There was bruising along her jaw, darkening toward purple. The wrist brace was bright white against her skin. And 4 line ran into her left arm. She was asleep, and her face in sleep had a stillness that felt private, the kind of expression a person only makes when they are certain no one is watching. Juno stood in the doorway of her room for longer than he would ever admit. He went to the nurse's station. The patient in 412. What is her status and who is her emergency contact? The nurse checked her tablet. The pause was too long. She is stable. Concussion, 2 rib fractures, wrist sprain. She will need rest. Another pause. She listed no emergency contact within Korea. There is an international listing, Accra, Ghana. We were unable to reach the number. No one else. No one else, sir. Park Juno, CEO, board chairman, son of the man who had built this empire from 3 factories and one enormous idea, had in his life made decisions that affected thousands of people. He had restructured divisions, entered new markets, fired executives with decades of tenure when the numbers required it. He had never found any of those decisions particularly complicated. He went back to room 412. He pulled the chair to the side of the bed. He sat down. That was how she found him when she woke up 43 minutes later. He watched her eyes open, focus. Find the ceiling. Find the window. Find him. The sequence of expressions that crossed her face was something he knew he would remember. Confusion, then recognition, then something that was not quite disbelief, but was its close cousin. Why, she said, voice rough with sleep and medication, are you here? It was the first time she had ever spoken to him first. 8 months of one-way silence, and now here, in a hospital room, she was looking at him and waiting for an answer. He had answers. He always had answers. Polished, purposeful, boardroom-tested answers that served whatever the moment required. He opened his mouth. I don't know, he said. She blinked. He held the look. The room was very quiet. You never looked at me, she said. Her voice wasn't accusatory. It was worse than that. It was just true, delivered without drama, the way you state a fact you've made peace with. Not once. In 8 months. I know. I brought you coffee every single morning. She shifted slightly and winced from the ribs. He moved forward instinctively, then stopped himself. She ignored it. Rain. Snow. The morning in January when the subway broke down and I ran 6 blocks, so it would still be hot when I got there. I was there every day. He said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't make it worse. You never even, she stopped. Exhaled carefully. You never said good morning. Not once. Not thank you, not hello, not even looked up. I noticed today, he said quietly. When it wasn't there. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned her face toward the window, where the late morning light was pressing through the blinds in pale parallel strips. That's not the same thing, she said. No, it isn't. He didn't soften it or explain it away. You're right. More silence. Outside the room, the hospital moved around them, footsteps, a cart wheeling past, a distant Pennsylvania announcement in Korean. My name is Amara, she said finally. In case you didn't know. Amara Osei, he said. I read it on your intake form. She turned back. And yours? Or do you only go by your title? Something about that question, its calm, almost dry precision, did something to him he couldn't immediately name. In 15 years of running Juno Group, not one person, not one board member, not one senior executive who should have known better, had ever spoken to him like that. Like he was simply a person who might require reminding that he had a name. Juno, he said. Park Juno. She said it once, testing the weight. Juno. Then, you should go back to work. You have an entire corporation to run. I rescheduled everything. She stared. The Samsung meeting? Everything. She studied him the way someone studies a thing they're not sure they're reading correctly. Why? I already told you. I don't know. She was quiet for a moment. Then something shifted in her face, a very small softening, almost invisible, like a door easing open an inch. Fine, she said. But I'm not performing for you. I'm tired of performing. I'm not asking you to. She closed her eyes. Her breathing steadied, and he understood that she wasn't sleeping, she was simply done expending energy on appearances. He stayed. He sat in that chair and did not check his phone and did not think about the Samsung meeting or the rescheduled board call or the 3 reports waiting on his desk. He sat with the particular quality of stillness he had not felt since he was very young, when stillness had not yet come to feel like failure. He stayed until the evening nurses arrived and gave him politely immovable looks that he recognized as professional code for, "Visiting hours have an end." He left his card at the nurse's station. He gave specific instructions. If she needed anything, prescriptions, a specialist consultation, a different room, food that wasn't hospital food, they were to call him directly. He used the tone that meant this was not a request. In the car back to the office, he called his assistant. "Pull Miss Osei's personnel file. Full history. I want it on my desk tonight." He paused. "And find out who in that building has been making her work environment hostile." A long silence. Then, "Sir, are you certain you want to? I asked you to do it, not to evaluate whether I should." "Yes, sir." He arrived at the office at 8 p.m. The personnel file was on his desk. He read it cover to cover. The degree, the language preparation, the 3 years of prior experience, the performance reviews, all satisfactory or above, written in the flat language of people who had not bothered to look closely. He read them and felt something that was going to take him a while to fully identify as shame. The next morning he arrived at 6 a.m. He went to the break room. He stood in front of the coffee station for 2 full minutes reading labels, which he had never done before because someone had always done it for him. He found the bag she always used. He knew it, he realized, because he had seen her carry it. He had registered it without meaning to. He had paid attention without knowing he was paying attention. He made the coffee. He watched 2 videos on his phone first, because he was a man who did not do things badly. He brewed it carefully. He poured it into a clean cup. He walked to her desk. Her desk was in the corner, the least desirable corner, the one furthest from the window, where the printer noise was loudest. Someone had once put a half-dead plant on it and left it there, and she had watered it consistently enough that it had survived. He stood looking at that plant for a moment. He set the coffee down. He took a post-it note from her desk organizer. He wrote 4 words, "Get well soon, Juno." He tucked it under the cup. He walked back to his office and closed the door and did not tell himself that any of this was purely professional. When Amara arrived, moving with careful deliberateness, one hand pressed light against her ribs, wrist in its brace, the office had been open for 40 minutes and was operating at full performance of normalcy. Everyone was conspicuously busy. She stopped when she saw the cup. She stood completely still. She looked at it the way you look at something that doesn't belong in the landscape it's appeared in. She reached out and picked up the note. She read it. She set it down very carefully, then picked up the cup with both hands, and for a moment, just a moment, she pressed it close. Choi, watching from across the open plan, for the first time in 8 months had nothing to say. By Friday, the entire floor knew. Juno had canceled 3 meetings to drive her to a follow-up appointment at the clinic 3 kilometers away. He waited in the car. When she came out, he was standing beside it with the passenger door already open, and he drove her home without making it feel like an obligation or a spectacle. He kept the radio on low. He didn't fill the silence with anything unnecessary. "You're different than I thought," she said when they stopped outside her building. "What did you think?" She considered. "I thought you were the type of man who treats people as background. Set dressing. Things that exist to make your life run." "I was," he said. There was no defense in it. Just honesty, flat and without performance. "I was exactly that." She looked out the window. Seoul passed its Friday afternoon noise through the glass, horns, heels on pavement, the particular layered noise of a city that never fully lowers its voice. "1 cup of coffee," she murmured. "What?" She turned. "Nothing. Just, it's strange, isn't it? 8 months. 1 cup every morning. And it took the cup being gone for any of it to land." He didn't look away. "Tell me about where you're from." She blinked. "Why?" Because I've been reading a file full of your credentials and qualifications, and I don't know a single true thing about you. She was quiet for 3 seconds. 4. Then she turned in her seat and started talking. She talked about Accra the way you talk about something you love enough to also find infuriating. The market near her mother's house where you could buy smoked fish and fabric and pirated Korean dramas from the same woman, and she would insist you sit and have tea before leaving. The secondary school she had attended on a bursary, where she had decided at 14 that she would run something one day, not assist in the running of something, but run it herself. Her father, who had died when she was 22 and had left her the specific legacy of a man who told his daughter constantly that she was exactly enough. She talked about the airport. Her mother holding both her hands at the departure gate, gripping them the way you grip something you're about to let go. You are going to become everything you already are. A line Amara had turned over in her mind on the plane, through customs, on the bus to her first apartment, on every bad morning since. She talked about the colleague on her first day at Juno Group who had asked, loudly and without embarrassment, whether she spoke English. And how she had looked at him and said, in Korean, "I also speak this," and walked away, and how the memory still gave her something between satisfaction and grief because she had had to turn it into a story to survive it. Juno listened the entire time without speaking. He did not offer perspective or solutions. He did not redirect. He listened with the complete, uninterrupted attention of a man who had suddenly understood that he had been living in a very narrow field of vision and had mistaken it for the whole world. When she stopped, she looked around and realized they were parked and had been for some time. "I've kept you," she said. "I'm sorry. You haven't. I have a board dinner in 30 minutes, and I would cancel it right now without a second thought if you kept going." She laughed. It surprised them both. It came out bright and unguarded and entirely real, not the careful, professional near smile she had deployed for 8 months to communicate that she was fine, everything was fine. This was something that had not been approved in advance. He felt it like a door opening in a room he hadn't known was sealed. "Go to your dinner, CEO Park." "Juno." She paused with her hand on the door. "Juno." Just his name. One quiet syllable, spoken the way you say something you're going to keep. She went inside. He sat in the parked car for 8 minutes. He was not a man who sat in parked cars. His phone rang at 9:17 p.m. His mother's name on the screen. He stared at it for 2 rings, because he always knew with her, what kind of call this was going to be. He answered. "Mother." "Juno." Her voice was precise and low temperature, the voice she used when she had already gathered information and was now delivering a verdict. "I have heard things today. From people I trust. I'm certain you have. They tell me you canceled a partnership meeting that took 6 months to schedule. They tell me you were seen at Seoul General Hospital. They tell me you have been personally driving one of your level 1 assistants to medical appointments." A pause calibrated to land with maximum weight. "Is all of this true?" "Yes." "Juno." She was alone in a hospital room, mother. No family in the country. No emergency contact who picked up. She had an 4 in her arm and a bruised jaw, and no one had come. She is an employee. This is what HR departments are. Who is she? His mother's voice dropped in a way that meant she had moved past the opening argument to the real one. This woman. Who is she? I ran the name. Ghanaian National. Level 1. "Juno, you are the chairman of." "I know what I am." "Then you understand why this is." "She brought me coffee every morning for 8 months, mother." His voice was quiet. It was the voice she'd always feared more than his anger, because it meant he had already decided. Every single morning. And I never looked at her. I never said her name. She ran 6 blocks in January so it would still be warm, and I waved her away like she wasn't there. He paused. "I'm not going to keep doing that. Juno, I'm asking you to think carefully about what you..." "I am bringing her everything, mother. For the rest of her life." He said it the way you say a thing you have only just understood, but understood completely. "I need you to absorb that. And I need you to know that what happens next is not a conversation I am available to have. The silence on the line stretched long enough that he could hear her breathing change. "You don't know what you're doing," she said finally, and for the first time there was something under the marble that sounded almost like fear. "For the first time in a long time," he said, "I think I do. Good night, Mother." He ended the call. He stood at his window. The entire skyline of Seoul spread below him, lit and enormous and completely indifferent to individual human decisions, and he felt the particular stillness of a man who has just said out loud the thing that was already true. Across the city, in a small apartment in Mapogu, Amara Ose was sitting at her kitchen table with a mug of tea going cold beside her laptop. The resignation letter was still open on the screen, exactly where she had left it Wednesday night. 3 sentences. A highlighted block. She stared at it for a long time. She thought about a man sitting beside her hospital bed for reasons he couldn't explain. She thought about a post-it note tucked under a coffee cup on her desk. She thought about the way he had listened to her in that car, not waiting for his turn to speak, but actually listening the way so few people ever had, here or anywhere. She thought about her mother's voice at the airport. "You are going to become everything you already are." She highlighted the 3 sentences. She deleted them. She closed the laptop. She got up to make fresh tea, moving carefully around her sore ribs, and stood at the small window looking out at the parking garage and the convenience store and the particular anonymous quality of the neighborhood that had been her whole world for 8 months. It looked different somehow. Not smaller. Not easier. Just different. Like a room where someone has shifted the light. She didn't know what was coming. She had no way of knowing that his mother was already making calls to 3 different people. That Monday morning would bring something she hadn't prepared for. That the real test hadn't started yet. All she knew, standing at her kitchen window with fresh tea warming her hands, was that she had not quit. That felt like something. It felt, in fact, like the beginning of everything. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't arrive in grand gestures and declarations and scenes from films. Sometimes it arrives as an absence. A cup that isn't there. A quiet panic you can't explain. A chair pulled to a bedside in a hospital room where no one asked you to be. Sometimes it arrives at exactly 7 a.m. in the space left behind by a simple cup of coffee. Hot beverage. Comment coffee below if you want part 2, where his mother makes her move and Amara has to decide exactly how much she is willing to fight for. Like this video if you felt every word. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button. New stories every week. We'll see you in part 2.